heal as a team, we're going to crumble. Inch by inch, play by play, till we're finished. We're in hell right now, gentlemen, believe me. And we can stay here, get the shit kicked out of us, or we can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell. 1 inch at a time. You know, when you get old in life, things get taken from you. I mean, that's part of life. But you only learn that when you start losing stuff. You find out life's this game of inches. So is football. Because in either game, life or football, the margin for error is so small. I mean, 1/2 a step too late or too early, and you don't quite make it. 1/2 second too slow, too fast, you don't quite catch it. The inches we need are everywhere around us. They're in every break of the game, every minute, every second. On this team, we fight for that inch. On this team, we tear ourselves and everyone else around us to pieces for that inch. We claw our fingernails for that inch. Because we know when we add up all those inches, that's going to make the fucking difference between winning and losing. Between living and dying. I'll tell you this, in any fight, it's the guy who's willing to die who's going to win that inch. And I know if I'm going to have any life anymore, it's because I'm still willing to fight and die for that inch. Because that's what living is. There's 6 inches in front of your face. Now I can't make you do it. You got to look at the guy next to you. Look into his eyes. Now I think you're going to see a guy who will go that inch with you. You're going to see a guy who will sacrifice himself for this team because he knows when it comes down to it, you're going to do the same for him. That's the team, gentlemen. And either we heal now as a team, or we will die as individuals.
Ideas are bulletproof.
Welcome to the show, guys. It is September 11th, 2011, the 10th anniversary of the 9/11 false flag mind control operation terror attack. This is Popeye, and today I'm joined by an awesome roundtable of guests. But before I bring them on, I'm going to play something. It's a clip I've played before, but today it's very appropriate for me to play it again and let the people, the listeners, hear it. It's a message from JFK that's almost 50 years old, and I don't care if anybody thinks it gets old to listen to it. We need to listen to it again and listen to what he was talking about because it is very pertinent to what is going on today in the world, all over the place.
President John F. Kennedy.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes. or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. Dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program, for from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. For I have complete confidence in the response and dedication of our citizens whenever they are fully informed. I not only could not stifle controversy among your readers, I welcome it. This administration intends to be candid about its errors. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We intend to accept full responsibility for our errors, and we expect you to point them out when we miss them. Without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. And that is why our press was protected by the First Amendment, the only business in America specifically protected by the Constitution, not primarily to amuse and entertain, not to emphasize the trivial and the sentimental, not to simply give the public what it wants, but to inform, to arouse, to reflect, to state our dangers and our opportunities, to indicate our crises and our choices, to lead, mold, educate, and sometimes even anger public opinion. This means greater coverage and analysis of international news, for it is no longer far away and foreign, but close at hand and local. It means greater attention to improved understanding of the news, as well as improved transmission. And it means, finally, that government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
And that is why I do what I do. That is why I spend all this volunteer time. That's why my fellow radio show hosts and my friends spend all their time doing what they do in research. None of us make money doing this. We're doing what we have to do because the mainstream media failed in what they were asked to do by President Kennedy 50 years ago. They are not informing and alerting the general public. They are not telling them that there's a massive conspiracy. They are not telling them what is going on. They're not warning them about the health issues with vaccines. They're not telling you about mind control programs. So it's left up to people like Chris Geo and Sheree from Truth Frequency, or JJink, or Steve Stars, or Bob Tuskin, or Alex Thomas and Shepard Ambellis of the Intel Hub, or myself and the other guys over at federaljack.com. It's left up to people like us and others as well. Jones, Gary Franchi, like everybody plays a part. You know, we're doing what needs to be done. Some make money off of it, but most of us, aside from maybe one of the last people mentioned, don't make any money doing this. We spend a lot of money, but we don't make it. But we're standing up and doing what's right. We're going to break. We'll be back in a minute. Stay tuned. When we come back, we'll introduce all my guests. You don't want to miss it.
Lie to pretend to be free till you die a slave, a soldier in the desert searching for a ghost in the cave for the corporation. I run out of patience, sick of seeing troops sent to die for your lives, spending dollars in death. We holler in protest till we have your arrest. We will not rest, and we know what you did that day. Kill your own citizens to advance your ways. All my real patriots stand up and say 9/11.
9/11 was totally an inside job. I know Bob Tuskin hates that term, but I particularly don't just blame the government. I said before, the government's a tool. But anyway, I can get into that in a minute. I want to introduce my panel of guests that are hanging out with me today for the 10th anniversary of 9/11. They are all friends of mine, very well-respected researchers and radio show hosts. So let me say hello to Steve Stars. Steve, say hello.
Glad to be with you. Thanks, Popeye.
Chris, Gio, and Sheree of Truth Frequency.
Hey, how you doing?
Always a pleasure.
JJ.
Hey. Hello. Hey, thanks for having me on, man. Thanks, really.
No problem, JJ. So, guys, I have to ask you. Everybody remembers where they were 10 years ago. I know I remember where I was 10 years ago. First and foremost, what are your thoughts about the past 10 years? And I'll start with Chris and Sheree.
You want to start? Oh, you want me to start?
Yeah.
The last 10 years have been very strange. It's like society changed in a fundamental way after 9/11. And I remember where I was at 9/11, but I think, everybody every year always goes over where they were on 9/11. And I think it just kind of feeds into the traumatization of it. Whenever every year we go through this, is there going to be another terror attack? And then another terror attack doesn't happen. And then we're like, good thing we've got all this security now. It kept us from having another terror attack. And it's like down is up and right is left. It doesn't make any sense. Society nowadays makes no sense whatsoever. And as a result, a lot of people are going crazy because of that.
You remember how it was before? You remember how different it was?
Oh, my God. We left the front door open all the time before 9/11. We still do sometimes, But,
I wouldn't.
But it was...
Yeah, but you live in an armpit. I live out in the country.
Yeah, I live in Miami. You can't leave anything open. Go on, Sheree.
Well,
Sorry,
9/11 took several years for me to actually appreciate the impact of it because I was just a kid when it happened. I was 18, and I was just starting college, and I flew on an airplane 2 weeks after 9/11 and didn't even think twice about it. I wasn't scared. I wasn't... the media really had no control over my emotions, and I noticed people around me were really freaked out at the airport, and I was like, what is going on? For some reason, I just never bought into the whole fear about it.
Well, that's good, Sheree. I mean, maybe that was your brain's way of, some people aren't easily controlled, and if you have any sort of free thought, then you're not one of them. I could say you're not one of those people that can be easily controlled because you have free thought. I myself couldn't look at any of the images of 9/11 or anything after about 6 months. I had to stop looking at that stuff because being so close and having my own personal feelings about it just kept bringing up survivor's guilt. It really bothered me. I wasn't sleeping. I couldn't eat. I felt like I could have done more, should have done more. There could have been more. I should have told every time we got stopped trying to go in one of the tunnels or the bridges, trying to get over initially when they had clamped down and declared martial law in the city. I even had arguments with people where I was like, maybe I should have tried to wrestle the gun out of the guy's hand and, hit him over the head and go into the city anyway. They didn't, and there were plenty of people that felt the same way. It was, it was like forced guilt that's forced upon you. And after I was able to get over that, is when I looked into it. And as soon as I started to look into it, somebody had told me about, the theory of it being done on purpose and everything. And I looked into it with the intent of actually discrediting the 9/11 truth movement. I got in this to try to be like, these people are out of their minds. I'm sure the government story isn't the official story, but come on, And the more I researched and everything, I was like, oh my God. I realized that the alternative theories were correct, and that's where the evidence pointed to. I mean, let me ask you this, Steve. You've researched 9/11 just as much as any of us have. The hijackers, they shouldn't have been able to get into this country. Okay, they shouldn't have been able to get in. Michael Springman from the State Department, he came out and he said that they shouldn't have been able to get in. How do people not see that that's like a smoking gun right there? They opened the door for these guys to get in.
Yeah, right. And, we had Able Danger. We had so many programs, and people like Muhammad Atta should have been showing up on the radar a long time before, any of this happened. But, another thing that I talked about before the show that we ought to mention as well, as far as how I came about all this, is we're coming up on 25 minutes after the hour, Popeye, and here is something that probably won't be well celebrated on this anniversary, but for a moment of silence, maybe we got to recognize that this is at the time 10 years ago when World Trade Center 7 fell. And, a lot of people were killed in that building that we weren't told about. There were a lot of things that happened in that building that we weren't told about. And, that was part of what brought me around.
Let's all mark let's take like a 10-second, thing of silence to mark the collapse of World Trade Center 7 and the untimely death of Barry Jennings after he testified about what he experienced inside of the building.
Bombs in the basements.
That was a good idea, Steve. And, it's one of the only ways maybe we could, mark the fact that WTC 7 fell. Most people don't even realize there was a third building that fell that day. And Mark Passio, I had him on Friday. He was talking about the whole, the occultish aspect of it and how, in one of their ceremonies, and I don't remember exactly what it was called, but you can go back and listen to the archive, it involves like 3 pillars. And if you look at the buildings that fell, it looked 3 pillars, Tower 1, Tower 2, and Building 7. They were all pretty tall. And Building 7 would have been the tallest skyscraper in 33 states.
48, almost 50 stories.
Doesn't anybody find that a little odd that the building just fell into its own footprint very neatly?
I think it's very odd.
Free fall.
I think it's very odd that they are now claiming that it's Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden and his right-hand man that are into numerology and into this esoteric stuff when it's really them.
Oh, are they really? I didn't even know that.
Yes. Oh, my God. It's all over the media. Oh, Al-Qaeda is interested in certain dates and symbols.
All right, because, the Nazis were into the occult, too. They play that up all the time.
Well, the Nazis really were into the occult.
No, I know that. I'm just
imaginary
saying.
Organization.
And Al-Qaeda is into the occult as well.
Of course they are. Well, I mean,
they even have their own branch of Freemasonry.
Yeah,
oh,
she's right.
Islamic fundamentalists. Yeah, no, I'm with you.
They have their own secret societies and everything.
Yeah, they do.
Oh, I believe that.
Yeah, so what they're saying is true, but it's a half-truth.
Yeah, that's how they do it. They're blinking it on fictional people.
Hey, that's a word. We're going to put that in the Urban
Dictionary.
There
we go.
That's what we could call the book.
We should just start a fictionary.
We'll call
the
it
9/11 fictionary.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's a good idea.
The Dictionary of 9/11 terms. We'll put thermal expansion in it. We'll put,
Well, thermal expansion is actually a real term, but it has nothing to do with what...
It was a previously unknown phenomenon.
Did you know what I heard on the news today?
Okay, so
it's like 6:30.
It's not that old. It is a bird.
I heard pancake. I heard pancake. I heard it repeated over and over and over again. Well, it's pancaking effect, and I'm like, oh, damn it! It did not pancake. Even NIST admits it didn't pancake because if it
where's the floors?
There would be a stack of crap there. It turned to dust. Explain that one without explosives. What? Oh, fire does that? Oh well, I guess all the insurance companies all over the world better start freaking out, because now apparently fire just brings down buildings into their own footprint, very neatly and controlled. Really interesting. We're going to break. We'll be right back. We are back. Sheree, during the break, you and I were having a really interesting conversation, and I'd like you to pontificate about what you were talking about during the break, because I cut you off so that we could repeat the conversation on air. So go ahead.
It's okay. Well, whenever you look at any kind of leader that's been demonized by the media or by the government, there's always another side to the story, whether it's Gaddafi or whether it's, Idi Amin. Yeah, there are some bad things about these people, yes. But what's worse, having a dictator that, does take care of you to some extent, or having, like a multinational military come in and just slaughter a bunch of your neighbors? That's where the thing
and
we're
then
bringing
create
up.
the Wild West atmosphere that's going on over there now. At least Gaddafi, he gave his people free stuff.
Free money, and now they're going to have.
Well, they didn't have a Rothschild Zionist central bank inside.
From now on, when you have money that comes with debt attached to it, comes with interest. When everything comes with interest, all hell breaks loose.
But see, they didn't have to pay. It was like 15 or 17 cents a gallon for gas.
Yeah.
Get ready to see $3.
Did we
gallon
talked
gas.
about that? About what? Oh no, we were talking about it during the break. Chris brought it up. In Libya, before. I mean, you can say what you want about Gaddafi, but NATO's killed more Libyans than Muammar Gaddafi. Already.
Well, the whole
30,000?
Dude, the whole idea of us protecting civilians is a farce, because you see them right now in Beni Ali or however you pronounce it, one of the holdout cities.
Beni Walid?
Yeah, they're bombing the NATO is bombing the hell out of it. Some reports are coming out saying that they're using mustard gas on the people inside. How is that protecting civilians?
I know.
How is that protecting? That's some now. I mean, I haven't been able to independently verify it, but some people I've seen some of the stuff coming out through Facebook and Twitter from inside the city, and people are sending it around. And there's a couple articles here and there with little small blurbs about it. I'm trying to get like a live report to see if but they said that they're jamming the radio waves and that they're using chemical weapons of some sort, and somebody mentioned mustard gas. Now, I don't know if it's true or not, but I know they are bombing. At the very least, they're bombing the city.
Well, that would break the cardinal rule that Israel is the only one that's allowed to use chemical weapons against countries they don't like. White phosphorus is where I draw the line. No, this is awful.
Well, speaking of mustard gas, a lot of people don't realize, but Saddam mustard gassed the village. And what happened there is the village was like terrorists, and they were harboring terrorists. And when I say terrorists, what they did is they tried to assassinate Saddam. Yeah. And so his retaliation was to go and try to find these people. They were hiding them, so he mustard gassed the whole village. What do we do to terrorists? We do the exact same thing. We put them in Guantanamo Bay, we torture them, et cetera, et cetera.
We kidnap their kids, Chris, and then sexually abuse them in front of them until they talk, or cover them in ants and stuff like that. But that's okay, because, hey, it's righteous and it's justified. Remember 9/11. Remember 9/11.
Yeah, but there's only one military in the last 30 or 40 years that has millions of bodies, and that's ours.
Well, I've noticed
dead bodies. None of these other countries or dictators have killed as many of their own people as we have, and we went in there to liberate the people, to protect them.
It's always an inside job. I mean, you look at Libya.
What was Libya like before NATO? I mean, everybody gets the idea that, Muammar Gaddafi hired or sponsored the Pan Am
He didn't sponsor Pan Am.
No, I know that, but I'm just saying. Everybody thinks that he was part of the Lockerbie thing, and he
but
killed
that's
us.
where they get the justification. That's why you hear people. He's got American blood on his hands.
We're there to protect civilians. It has nothing to do with Pan Am 103. So, Chris, what was life like before we went in there for Libya under Gaddafi? Regardless of what you might think about him, what would the people? Because he was beloved there, regardless of what you think. I don't care what they're showing us.
My mother grew up in Libya and lived there for like 15 years of her life or something like that. Where she was originally from Cyprus, and there's a big oil industry over in Libya. So my grandfather went from Cyprus to Libya. It was full of British people, French people. It was very, very mixed because of the oil trade. But Gaddafi, let me back up. Let me say Libya. In Libya, you have a right to a house. Electricity's free. You have a right to health care. You have a right to all of your basic living needs. It's not, that you have to go pay for it.
And not a right to health insurance. You have the right to free health care to be treated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Well, not anymore. You had. Let's rephrase that.
Well, they have usury there now.
No. You had the right. Now there's a Rothschild Zionist bank. Now you won't.
So
go on, Chris.
It was an upper middle class country. The majority of people were upper middle class. The hospitals rivaled our hospitals here that we pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for. And Gaddafi did all this for his people.
They were like the Switzerland of
not only
Africa.
that, but a lot of people don't realize too the Islamic banking system that plays a big role in this. In the Islamic banking system, if you want a loan, what they do is you go to the bank and you say, I want a loan to start a business. They say, okay, well, you're going to charge you a small fee. We're not going to charge you any interest, and we're going to give you the loan. Then you go and you build your business, and then you have the other businesses who have gotten loans from this bank who are helping you to succeed. They want you to succeed because they want you to pay it back. So you pay it back, and then it becomes your job to help somebody else who's just starting a business out. This is what they were going after. They weren't going after, because he was killing his own people and whatnot. I mean, we broke it in last March where Reuters was faking photographs, and they were saying they showed some people in front of a banner, and there were like all these people, all these mugshots of people, and I could tell they were mugshots, and it had a big date on there that said 1996 at the top, and at the bottom of the caption it says the people who are honoring the fallen in Gaddafi's rule in the last couple of days during the uprising. And I'm going, wait a minute, why does this banner say 1996? We translated that. We found out what that date was. What they do is they were doing a memorial for some people who were slaughtered in a prison. And so not only did Reuters do this once, they did this over and over and over again.
They're doing it now. Look at the BBC. I have a video up. It's got over 20,000 views. The BBC got caught like a week and a half ago. You see their two hosts are talking about, the people in Tripoli are celebrating the rebels' ousting of Gaddafi.
Oh, the rebels are celebrating.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't even in Libya. It was a shot of some festival parade that they had on B-roll from India. It was like a soccer match or something, and they're Indian people holding Indian flags, and they're sitting there. They have it up, and they're saying "Live in Tripoli." And then when they got caught with their pants down, you know what they said? "Oops, we accidentally aired the wrong stuff."
So let's see the real stuff you were going to air then. But they'll never do that, will they?
It's the same thing that happened on 9/11.
It goes even deeper though, because it was a total inside job. I forget the guy's name because I don't have the notes in front of me, but his what was it, like foreign minister or something like that, who was leading the rebels. It was funded by the CIA. He was a CIA asset. He was a known CIA asset, and all his people who were inside in his staff were all co-opted by the CIA. Now we can take it an even step further and look at the National Endowment for Libya.
For Democracy.
No, what was the Libyan Front? I need to get my notes in front of me, but the Libyan Front, for lack of a better term, because I don't know the exact one, is the rebel group.
It was the Rebel Front for the Salvation of Libya.
There you go. And it turns out that they're funded by the National Endowment for Democracy. You go to the you go to their website. You've got George Bush and John McCain right on the front page. This is supposedly a private organization that helps spread democracy throughout the world.
And remember, McCain is the poster boy for invading countries. Him. Lindsey Graham and Lieberman. The three of them are you ever notice every time they want to bomb somebody, they roll those three jerk-offs out on every Sunday morning show, and then during the following week they're on like CNN, Anderson Cooper, and all three of them are, even if they're not together, they could be on three separate shows, they're all saying the same thing. talking points.
Right.
A week.
Well, let's take it a step further back, though, and you know, besides what Gaddafi was doing for his people and the fact that he was getting mad. I mean, he got up in front of the UN and he says they're forcing me to sell my oil for $40 a barrel, and I can't make a profit from it. And this was at a time when we were paying $3 at the pump. We still are paying that, but we were paying $3 at the pump, and they were buying the oil from Gaddafi for $40 a barrel. So he goes on Larry King, and Larry King asks him, "Do you condemn the 9/11 attacks in Osama bin Laden?" And he goes, "Osama bin Laden had nothing to do with it. Even your own FBI hasn't even charged him. All the hijackers were funded by the money came from Saudi Arabia. I mean, the money came from the United States, and they were trained in the United States, and these people came from Saudi Arabia." I mean, this was on national American TV where he's saying this. Now let's take it an even step further. He starts talking to the UN, and he's saying that the top 6 are the ones who veto all of the votes. Is that breaking music? Oh, man.
What do you call them? The bumper Nazis?
The bumper Nazis, yes.
They're coming. See, they follow you to my show.
Now, one more point before break is he got in front of his people and he started referring to Obama as his Kenyan-born brother.
Oh, yeah.
Over and over and over again.
That helped.
See,
Him up.
Obama said he's got to go, so he's got to go.
Don't sit back or hesitate to react to the impact. Many taking a nap. In fact, they would fake an attack to make way.
Killed my entire family, murdered and tortured, raped and pillaged. I was only 5 and I was the only survivor.
Welcome back, guys. It is 9/11/2011, and I am joined by an awesome round table of guests, researchers who know what they're talking about when it comes to 9/11. These guys aren't some fly-by-night and girl. I don't want to, not include Sheree. All of them are very smart and super intelligent. Sheree is like a little vacuum of information.
Aw, thank you.
You even Chris will attest to this. Apparently, you can suck the information out of a book and read faster than anybody he's ever seen. Apparently.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was telling him earlier that it takes me like 20 seconds to read a paragraph, and you read the whole damn page in that time.
And I know from my conversations with you, you are a wealth of knowledge. You are highly intelligent. It's nice to see women that are awake, because a lot of times you don't see and I'm not making fun of females, but a lot of times females are caught up in that Bravo network or Lifetime TV crap.
Yeah, I know. I have never been able to watch anything like Lifetime or anything like that. And I've never been a normal girl. Even as a kid, I wasn't really playing with Barbies as much as I was reading books. So I've always been a little bit weird like that. So
I don't think that's weird. I think that's the way it should be. Instead of playing with useless toys, you should be reading books and stuff like that and educating yourself.
Well, I've always wanted to gain more knowledge, no matter what. And I don't think that highly of myself. It's just I always want to know more. And I started researching World War II and the Nazi concentration camps whenever I was 10. So I've always, for some reason, just been really interested in this kind of thing, and always wanted to know more. And whenever I woke up to the reality of 9/11 and this whole truth movement back in 2006 or 2007, that's when I really started learning more and researching more. And I remember things that I care about, and I care about this. So.
If I can jump in for a second.
Go ahead, Chris.
I come from Texas, and we got a sneak peek of what 2000 to 2008 would be like. And that was because the governor was George Bush. I was in the rave scene at the time, DJing, promoting, and throwing rave parties. And I remember on September 11th, I had a meeting to go meet with this venue because we were supposed to throw a rave on November 17th, which we wound up throwing that rave. But anyway, I'm getting kind of off topic. The point is, we started getting raided all the time. And not just our parties, everybody's rave parties. I have been in several raids where you just have jump out boys just jumping out and coming into these parties where people are dancing and just grabbing people, throwing them to the ground, arresting people, and so on and so forth.
It's the war on terror, Chris. You guys could all be Al-Qaeda pretending to be ravers.
Well, we were gathering in 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people. We'd have massive parties of 20,000, 50,000 people. They can't have that. If they're going to bring in a police state, they can't have that kind of unity. So they
Unless y'all are beating the crap out of each other.
Yeah, well, yeah. If we're fighting, they never did anything with the hip hop scene because my thoughts were, well, they have guns. We don't carry guns. We're peaceful and loving. But I think the point was because there's so much division and fighting amongst other scenes like that they really didn't care. Was the rave scene because our mantra was peace, love, unity, and respect. Plur. And people go, oh, Plur, that's so stupid. But that's really what it came down to. So I think, that what George Bush was doing there in Texas was kind of a test run for what we were going to see over the next 8 years.
Yeah, George was an evil, evil man. And you know what? It's not him that came up with these ideas. Well, he is, but it's not him that came up with these ideas. He's just some dick who sits in the seat and takes the blame for it, just like Obama is. But he's not really the one that pushes for this kind of stuff. It's the behind-the-scenes morons and the lobby.
No, but he does all kinds of dirty dealings with filthy, dirty people.
No, he does. I'm not saying that anybody... Look, none of them are innocent.
These people are all filthy before they become president.
They're all guilty.
Well, he's a mass murderer. And he was before he even became...
Well, they're puppets,
president.
though. They're puppets. That's what we have to remember. And at the
It's
time,
a
I didn't
seat,
realize they were
guys,
puppets.
right? And it's a passenger seat, the president's seat.
And most of these people they put in charge, they have so much dirt on them. That's why they're in the position of power.
Oh, yeah, man.
Yeah. Okay.
You know how much dirt there is out there on Clinton?
Well, let me ask you this, Steve.
Obama, not even a real person.
We always talk about they, the New World Order, they. Who could be they? And I'm not saying that they would be the end-all, be-all, top of the pyramid. But who do you think, or in your opinion, who do you think maybe gives some of the marching orders to these politicians, these so-called presidents?
Well, we know where they're coming from, Popeye. I mean, look at Georgetown University and the Edmund Walsh School of Foreign Affairs. Look who's running our CIA. You cannot disassociate the CIA with all of what's happened with 9/11. I mean, you got to start right there. I mean, you go back to the Kennedy assassinations, Martin Luther King, Bobby Kennedy. All of these things that have been happening have been CIA run and orchestrated all along. There's no way around the CIA's involvement in 9/11. So who's running the CIA? Well, they're all Georgetown trained. Panetta from Georgetown University, again through the Edmund Walsh School of Foreign Service, and then you have Tenet. He was there at the time. Wild Bill Donovan started, of course, the OSS turned into CIA, but he was a Knight of Malta, Catholic. Then you have a dropout, Rumsfeld. He was there at Georgetown. I mean, you got Bill Clinton. He graduated there. Now you have Petraeus. He's through that school. Gates was through that school. All of these people came through that little school of spies right there in Georgetown. All of them. So that's a big part of it. Then you, of course, you have the connections between people like the Skull and Bones community, which is out there at Yale. But, you have Jesuit-trained Kerry. He goes to school with his frat brother, covers for him the whole time, won the election in 2004, wouldn't take the office. I mean, that's the kind of dedication they have towards their goal. I would be... I guess remiss to not mention that there are the Sabbatean Labor Party Jews. There are those folks as well. But these are who the New World Order really is. It's not just they. We know who they are. Council on Foreign Relations, Bilderberg Trilateral Commission, Club of Rome. I mean, you just go down the list.
Council of 300.
Council of 300, yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
And they each their little roundtable groups, and then they have heads of each group, which then those heads are part of another roundtable group, and then the heads of that group are part of another roundtable group.
And all the while, they trickle little bits of money down, which is the crack that they use for the people in the seats below them.
Well, Albert Pike talked about this. They hijacked Freemasonry.
Yep, they did. George Washington was quite aware of it in his time. He knew that Luminized Freemason was spreading.
The Jacobites, he spoke about them in his diaries.
That's right, he did. They've been aware of this for a long time, and this little group of people have been working in and out, and dual citizenship, dual organizations. You have things like people like Tom Ridge and John Gannon, who set up Homeland Security, and then who takes over. Michael Chertoff, dual citizen Jew. And so you have all these different kinds of people who move in and out of this whole system. Henry Kissinger, George Soros, all the way down to Cardinal Spellman and Egan and these people like that. They orchestrate these events. They plan things around us, and we know who they are. The question is, will we ever stand up as a group of people and say, look, if someone's associated with these folks and we know who they are, why are we electing them? Why are we empowering them? And even more so, why aren't we charging them and trying them? Because 9/11 is not too big to be prosecuted any more than the Nuremberg trial was too big to be handled after World War II. What would we do with people like this? I mean, what do you do?
And don't you think there's enough evidence out there that we could just start collecting it and getting it together?
Well, we already have the evidence. The problem is you have to convince the public to be. Well, no, you're right, JJ. That brings up a good question. The thing is, you have to get the public to stand behind an investigation, an independent investigation. Half the general public, there are still people out there that, well, didn't they investigate it with the 9/11 Commission? Because people are so brain dead, if they're not touched by it personally, okay, a lot of times this stuff doesn't affect people. Most people only saw 9/11 on television. They don't have the same attachments as somebody that maybe lives 100 miles from New York. When you're in California and you're seeing the towers get hit by planes, it looks just like a movie because it's on TV.
Yeah.
1080p.
What did people say all the time? What was the one thing you guys heard?
1080i back
What was
then.
What's the one thing you heard most on that day?
I
thought it was a movie.
Explosions.
Well, that too. But I mean, what did you hear people say? It was like a movie. It was like watching a movie on TV.
The buildings came down probably from structural damage.
Oh, dude, that was my favorite. You have all of a sudden these eyewitnesses. Well, I think obviously you could tell that the buildings came down due to the structural damage from the fires inside. I wanted to be like,
so hot.
And then he does a pancake thing. He goes boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, I wanted to ask this guy. So, what did you work for NIST? Like, Jesus.
It's been proven he was an actor.
Of course.
It's funny how these terms change over time. Pre-9/11 pancaking entailed me and a couple of girls with some ecstasy.
I know, it was a good thing, wasn't it?
Oh my God.
Well,
pancake was cool back then.
Now you hear pancake, they're like, and you still have people. This is how you know the government's official story is horse crap. Okay, when the people that are officially defending it, like these people that they come out and they attack quote unquote truthers, and they call people truthers. Okay, and they come out and they make all these little ad hominem attacks. Their evidence is always stuff that even the federal government has come out and said, okay, no, that was wrong. And they still throw this evidence around because they expect most people will hear that they have some sort of evidence that explains it. Oh, okay, that crazy conspiracy stuff, because that seems so far out of reach. When it's like, dude, just 5 minutes of research. 5 minutes. I'm telling you. I said this when we were on Jimmy X's show earlier. A 5-year-old kid could debunk the government's official story with 15, 20 minutes of research on Google. I mean, these kids nowadays are pretty smart. I guarantee you, a child could debunk it. Just ridiculous. We're going to break. We'll be right back. We've got another hour. Stay tuned. Steve Starr, Chris, Sheree, and JJink. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. We are live this September 11th, 2011. I am joined by my good friends, fellow researchers, and radio show hosts, Chris, Gio, and Sheree from Truth Frequency, Steve Stars, and JJink from Against the Wall right here on the Orion Talk Radio Network. And we've been talking 9/11. We've been talking how
9/11-ish.
Yeah, 9/11 and 9/11-ish. We've been going a little deeper into other things because I've been on. This is going on my 6th hour today. So there's only so much you can repeat the same stuff over and over again to the listeners listening to you. But it's also important to touch on other things and explain how 9/11 was used and still is to this day to instigate and do things. And Libya,
and the process has been used over and over and over again.
Well, Libya is a perfect example, and here's how. Okay, they justify and when I say they, I mean the douchebags that run our government are justifying our involvement through NATO in Libya with, well, Gaddafi's got American blood on his hands with Pan Am Flight 103. Now, if you research that and you actually go and actually do any real research on it, and not what the government says, but you actually go research from, insiders, whistleblowing, stuff like that. Susan Lindauer is a perfect example. Okay, can
I interject something real quick? You also have to remember that Reagan ordered a strike against Gaddafi, and it was a car bombing, and they wound up bombing the wrong car and killed Gaddafi's 1-year-old son.
Exactly. So who's the real terrorists? Okay, and I'm not saying that every American is bad, but it's the people that hijack the government, and we use that as an excuse so that. And then what they do is now you have the trauma of 9/11 already programmed in the masses' heads, and they turn around and they go, well, remember, he's a terrorist. He look at Pan Am Flight 103, and instantly you hear terror. You think 9/11, the building's coming down, and oh my God, kill me! He's a bad guy. Protect me, save me. Okay, that's what it's for. So they still use 9/11 to this day to justify crap all the time. The war on terror, it should be changed to the war of terror, the war of terror, because that's what we are, like the Nazis. We have turned into the Nazis in the 30s.
We have screwed with these countries for so long that the people are sick and tired of it. I was talking to a soldier who just got back from Iraq. He was a customer for my little carpet cleaning company. And I started talking to him, and I asked him, well, how did you feel about being over there? He says, oh, man, those guys are insurgents. They're crazy. And I said, well, let me ask you this. If Russia and China were here, would you fight them? He goes, hell yeah, I'd be right on the front line. And I said, what's different? You're invading their home. You don't expect them to fight back?
Well, see, that's exactly the point. I'm assuming that anybody would fight back. Steve, wouldn't you fight back if somebody was...
if all I had was a table leg.
Well, you got to look at this. We were talking about Gaddafi. I mean, and Reagan. He's been there for 42 years. I mean, this guy's played more good guys and villains than, Lon Chaney. You know what I mean? It's like, how many times has Gaddafi been somebody who's a reformer that we want to support, and then he's a villain?
There's video of him at the G8 or the G20. He's shaking hands with Hillary Clinton and Obama back in 2009.
Well, what happened?
Oh, and Mubarak too.
Well, what happened is that in early 2000, they wanted Gaddafi to support the war on terror, and he wouldn't do it because he knew it was a complete and total fraud. So they threatened to sanction him, and they started to sanction. And the thing that people don't realize is when we sanction a country, we're not affecting the leader. We're affecting all of the people. I mean, there was we were watching MSNBC or something the other day, and they were laughing about, we need to sanction Iran. And it's like, you're not affecting them. You're starving their people is what you're doing. So in order to avoid the sanctions and everything, he started playing ball, and he went along with the war on terror, and they basically raped and pillaged all of his resources between that time. And that's why he was shaking hands with Hillary Clinton, because it was kind of a deal where he really didn't want to, but he was trying to do what was best for his people.
Yeah, he's definitely been in and out of the limelight for a long time. 42 years. Can you imagine that? I mean, going way back. Maybe it's even longer. But the key thing is if he was such a villain, why did they take him out back in the Reagan era? You know what I mean? Go ahead.
Well, what's interesting about the Lockerbie bombing is that the CIA is now changing their story about it, because now they're saying that he would have killed the guy that they arrested and put in prison for the Lockerbie bombing. And they're saying that he is such an a-hole. Apparently, he's going to kill this guy. And I found pictures of when the Lockerbie bomber, supposed Lockerbie bomber, came home. His son showed up and gave him a hug and said, welcome home. They even flew him home on his private jet.
There was anger over how well they treated him when he got off the plane.
Exactly. And now they're changing their story to try to make it sound like...
talking out of both sides of their mouth.
Exactly.
No.
It's the opposite.
Well, it's like, how was it in 1984? We've always been at war. We've never been at war. We've always been at war.
We're at war.
Yeah, Oceania has always been at war with Eurasia.
Yeah, we're at war when the media and the government decides we're at war. And we're okay with people when they decide we're okay with people. And it rarely has anything to do
Sheree,
with
Libya's not a war.
Rights.
Libya's not a war. It's a kinetic action.
Oh, it's a kinetic action.
Yeah, we never declared war on Iraq. We never declared war on Libya. Nothing.
No.
We're just going. We're creating empires by invading other
because
countries.
we
It's not a
are
war, it's an
absolutely
invasion.
not operating within the Geneva Convention. That is for sure.
What's that?
And if
Well,
you
I'm
look
just
at
saying,
it,
Chris said they're not.
What's
they're not
that?
legally declared wars.
What's the Constitution? I mean,
Sure.
apparently,
Sorry.
apparently, you don't have to even.
Yeah.
Apparently, you don't even have to ask the Congress.
Because they're enemy
War.
combatants. They've
Well,
sidestepped everything with their
terrorism.
language.
They're
And
insurgents.
this goes back to the trivium. They've sidestepped everything by changing the definitions of the words. I mean, take the word liberal, for instance. I think I said this on the show before, Popeye, but the word liberal comes from liberty. And all of a sudden it means socialist and communist and totalitarianism. And it's like, no. It means the opposite.
if you go back to what Jesus said, if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. And then you apply that to what we've done over in Iraq and Libya and all these other countries, we should expect to get invaded.
As Ron Paul would say, blowback, right?
Exactly. And instead of, I think the government is actually trying to destroy America from the inside out so that they can
Just
merge
destroy
it.
it completely, right?
Yeah,
Like Building
so they
7.
can merge it
They're
with the
gonna
rest
take
of
out
the world.
all the inner columns and
Nobody
let it
can.
drop.
Nobody can mess with us, though. We're protected by two great, vast oceans. And that was the whole goal of the United States, is to be protected by two big oceans. It has to be an inside job because they can't do it any other way.
Even there was a Russian spy, an ex-Russian spy, a former KGB agent, who said it best. He said that America has to be taken out from the inside out. And they have to do that slowly. It's going to take about 30 years. And this was back in the 80s. So he had it right on the money. It's going to take about 30 years to get the people so dumbed down and so sociologically inept that the society kind of falls in on itself. And he even said it perfectly. He said they're going to use drugs, they're going to use television, they're going to use radio, they're going to use anything they can to propagandize the public into thinking that nothing matters except their own personal happiness. And it'll destroy the country.
New Age movement, perfect example of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of examples of New Age movements and religious movements being connected to the CIA. Look at Jonestown, for instance. Jim Jones was
I
actually...
think almost all churches are somehow not... It's hard... You're right. Almost all the churches have some sort of all the new translations of the Bible, you'll read them alongside the old translations and they're never even, they're all just sort of
dumbed down.
Generic, They take the meaning and make it generic like a world it's coming.
Well, it's the same thing that they did in Brave New World and 1984, and it's basically changing the language and dumbing down the language to an extent where people have no free thought anymore, because their free thought is confined to maybe 300, 400 words instead of 3,000, 4,000 words.
Yeah, very well said, because that's exactly what's going on now. They've gotten most of these kids to a point where they're grunting now. They're not even using words. You can just scour the internet and see this, how they don't know how to spell anymore and how they've taken the spelling and changed it. Yeah, LOL, things like that. It's all pieces of the puzzle.
Well, that's why kids don't talk to each other anymore.
Fascism is what I like.
Kids stand next to each other and text each other now. They don't even talk to each other face to face. We're going to break. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. During the break, we were having a discussion about other things other than 9/11, how many events are all connected. And there's one thing that I'd like to bring up really quick. It needs its own show by itself. But, Steve, we were talking about the assassination of RFK.
Right, yeah.
And just some of the shady stuff that went on with that. So why don't you go ahead and tell the listeners really quick about just some of the, cover a few bullet points on the RFK assassination.
Well, they kept a lot of that obscured for so long, especially the official autopsy reports, which we now have, that show that 32 caliber bullet round in the back of RFK's lower right side of his skull there, which was indicative of the fact that they fired that weapon within inches, point blank, virtually, and it had to been he had to been killed by somebody else other than Sirhan. And so after all this time,
and that's from Noguchi. That's from the medical examiner. Out in California, and that's why they tried to make him look bad. And then through court, he was reinstated and everything. But they actually tried to throw him under the bus because he said that the kill shot came from behind his head, not from in front of him where Sirhan was. So that just rules out Sirhan as the killer. That means somebody else was in there with him.
Right. That brings up something that I was thinking about earlier today to say on the show, and that is this, Popeye. I remember when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. I was a kid. I remember when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated. I remember Martin Luther King. These were conspiracies that were pulled off, I'm sure, by the CIA, Catholics in Action, CIA. But I know that not that many people were really aware of what a small group of people were changing things. In contrast to 9/11, where we now have hundreds of thousands of people literally involved in this propaganda. You know what I'm getting at? This is how far it's gone. Because, they have football games today, where they're going to take a moment of silence to remember the victims and the attacks on 9/11. All this propaganda. Does anybody mention Pat Tillman at those games?
No.
Does anybody mention the fact that Tillman was killed because he was talking about coming out when he came back? He was possibly thinking about running for office and opening his mouth and telling everybody what he knew.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, it's gone from this small group of people who were able to, formulate this plan to kill JFK, Bobby, Martin Luther King, and probably Sonny Bono and a number of other people, to a massive agency of complete media domination. And, friends, I don't think that as many people out there believe the mainstream media as the mainstream media likes to make us think they believe. You know what I'm getting at? But there's not enough of us to really speak up and challenge these guys. I've encouraged people, look, if you go to a church or a synagogue or any place like that, and somebody starts talking about 9/11, and they're using the same official story scenario to make some point, you need to stand up and go, I don't mean to be disorderly, in all due respect, but that's all lies that you're telling us here.
It gets worse than that. I logged on to Facebook the other day. I log on maybe once a week. And I saw my old church, and it says, "The Cross and the Towers," an award-winning 9/11 documentary, will be shown in the sanctuary at 9:30 a.m. this Sunday. All adult and youth classes will join together in the sanctuary for this memorial event. Children's programs go on as normal, but 3 to 5 grade children are welcome to sit with their parents if the parent so chooses. And I watched the trailer for this film, and it was so bad that I couldn't even watch the whole thing. They were talking about burning flesh and, they were
trauma.
It was so bad. And
Scare the kids, Sheree, scare the kids.
And then they ended all with Al-Qaeda did it.
They ended all with Al-Qaeda did it, and this means something spiritually because there was a piece of it left of the World Trade Center that looks like a cross.
How come why don't they go interview the guy who found the cross and ask him what he thinks about 9/11 truth?
Exactly.
Because We Are Change did, and I'll tell you what, that guy had a few interesting things to say.
Yes, he did.
But you won't see that, will you? They'll just talk about how it was found, and we heard that there was a cross. They always find some random guy to talk about it. Why don't you find the guy that found it and ask him what he has to say about 9/11? Oh, because he doesn't agree with the official government theory. Oh, okay.
What bothers me, though, is that 3 to 5 grade children are welcome to sit with their parents if the parent so chooses. And I'll bet you all of them. All of them did it.
Look at that one word, program. Children's program will go on as usual.
Children's
Of course it will.
Of course it will. Come here, kitty. Sit in front of the idiot box and let it pump into your head over and over and over again. Steve, before I forget, because I had asked you about RFK.
Right.
Eventually, you and I are gonna do a show basically, just covering RFK. This Wednesday, you and I are doing a show, though. Right. 2-hour show on JFK Jr.
Yeah. I mean, here's another event just recently. So these things just keep going on, Popeye, because we can't seem to stop it.
You know,
one right after another.
With Kennedy Jr.'s death, you got to wonder, could this whole 9/11 false flag event even occurred if he had not been taken out? And people would say, well, what do you mean? Well, because if Kennedy had been allowed to live, there was a lot of talk about him getting involved in politics. Now, if he had gotten involved in politics, he would have most assuredly gotten the nomination instead of Al Gore. And do you think that the bumbling monkey moron would even stand a chance against someone like John? Because even Republican women had the hots for him. Because he was a young, good-looking guy. He was charismatic. He was smart.
Yep.
You know,
he had a lot of character, too. I mean, surprisingly enough, he really did have a lot of good character. He was
going to reopen the investigation of his father's murder. He had talked about that if he had gotten involved in politics and gotten to an elected position, he would reopen the investigation into it. He backed it. I mean, he published an article by Oliver Stone having the gall to accuse the government of killing his own father.
That's right. And he was covering stories about the inside job of Yitzhak Rabin's murder in Israel. He was doing a lot of those things on assassinations. George, his magazine was going political. Obviously, Hillary Clinton was threatened by what he was going to become because he had passed the bar. He was entering into politics. He was the golden boy at the Democratic convention just earlier. And, of course, he would have taken out Bush easily. And I think the young lad had a lot of good character. I really do. From what I've heard about him, he was a lot more I mean, he wasn't the playboy that his father and his uncle were, to be honest with you. He was a lot more conservative in his moral attitudes and things like that, and he really was a fine young man in many ways. And he was murdered, too. It's hard to believe. I just almost cried when I saw that film JFK recently again, Popeye, and I saw little John saluting there on the corner.
And that was his birthday, by the way. That's how he spent his birthday burying his daddy.
That was his birthday.
That's awful.
Yeah, not many people realize that little infamous picture of John saluting, that was his birthday.
And he's gone too, right?
Yeah, well, that's what we're talking about. On Wednesday, Steve and I are going to do a 2-hour show about it. They killed him too, and there's interesting proof that says there's evidence that backs up that what many people have said, that he had proof and paperwork to prove that the CIA and other people like Johnson and stuff were involved in his father's murder. Right. You know, his mother, after his mother died, these tapes just came out because her daughter released them, but she didn't want them to come out until 50 years after she had died. But Jackie talked about in these tapes how she thought that Johnson was completely involved in the assassination of her husband.
Oh, yeah.
And big oil people like Clint Murchison and the rest of them.
And George H. Walker Bush as well.
Oh, yeah.
Bush.
Mr. Zapata Oil.
You know, and he was there.
Yes, he was. Very close
he denies
associate.
It, but he was. And he was seen at meetings, private meetings, so he was there.
They're all associated with each other. The Bush family knew the Murchisons and all them.
Oh, yeah.
All right, guys. Chris's bumper Nazi seems to be following us around because he's hanging out with us today. It's sneaking up on us. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. We're covering everything today. 9/11, RFK, JFK. Who knows what else we'll get into when we get back.
HIV, AIDS, maybe.
Yeah, we can cover that too. Steve's here.
Yep.
Stand by.
From the lies they were feeding me. Then I sobered up and realized they were mistreating me. I stumbled out my bed and tried my best to gain some sense of it. The reasons for the cover-up, the reasons for the censorship. Now I realize that Uncle Sam was not befriending me.
Oh, I know the reasons for the cover-up, the reasons for the censorship. Because, like, Bush told a reporter, this British reporter that used to pal around with him back in the 90s, that if he made a comment to the effect of, if the American people ever found out what they were really up to, they would chase us down and lynch us in the streets. So that's why there's cover-ups and deceptions and propaganda and elaborate mind control schemes. When people question, they say, oh, they couldn't possibly do all that stuff. Yes, they do.
Jack was on our show a couple days ago. He brought up an interesting quote, but he hasn't been able to find this, and neither have I. If anybody out there can find it, please email it to Popeye or myself. But it was George Bush saying, don't worry if the government's falling apart because the shadow government's in control.
Yeah.
That wouldn't surprise me if he could say that. I mean, he used to run around talking about the New World Order. And do you know, when he announced it in the halls of Congress for the first time, do you know what day it was?
9/11/1991.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am.
There you go.
Isn't that interesting?
Now it's 9/11/2011.
Yep. But we're
20
crazy.
years.
We're crazy because we say the term New World Order, and then you turn on CNN, and they're doing a piece about Libya, and David Bohemian Grove Gergen is on there talking about how great the invasion of Libya is and everything else. And what do they have the title of the piece called? A New World Order with a question mark.
Yeah, it's no longer a conspiracy theory, is it? Yeah.
Well, again, a conspiracy theory is a theory that two or more people got together to conspire to do something bad. So if, Steve, if you and I decide we're going to go knock over a 7-Eleven, well, that's conspiracy to commit robbery. And people go to jail for that. People get locked up. Look at what they charge people all the time, protesters, with what? Conspiracy to riot. So how is it? Oh, these conspiracies, these conspiracists. No, a conspiracist would be the person involved in the conspiracy. You dickhead. See, that's
truthers is the most closest to what we really are.
That's a moniker handed out by the CIA, JJ.
I know. I'm just saying. I mean, that is closer than conspiracy.
I'm none of that. I am infinite consciousness that's pissed off because I see something that I have to hoist the BS flag on, and I'm raising awareness to it. Okay?
But wait a minute though. Why are you pissed? Why are you pissed? Because
you're saying it's right?
Well, that's true. I'm infinite consciousness. I shouldn't be angry, right?
Exactly, because anger comes from fear, and fear is the mind killer.
Yeah, very true. Way to segue, Chris. Jesus.
Nice.
He's right though. I mean, you shouldn't. I should reword that because I'm not angry. I don't run around screaming into a megaphone. I approach it with logic.
A Jehovah Witness truther?
Well, no, I don't go knocking on doors and offering the watchtower either. Let me tell you something. You want to talk about a bunch of Freemasons, okay? Go look up who founded Jehovah's Witnesses, right, Steve?
That's right. Russell was a Yorkite, a Freemason, and there's a lot of Freemason connections, Jehovah's Witnesses. I was just noticing, though, that somebody pasted the wiki 9/11 for your information page. A lot of interesting things. Did you ever hear Charles Lindbergh's speech on 9/11 in 1941, I believe it was? Charles Lindbergh, the aviator, his father was the famous senator, talking about the military-industrial complex and how we were being goaded into that war just months before December 7th. This is really interesting, too. I don't know if you guys saw any of that, but there's a very good speech by Lindbergh, the pilot.
No, I've heard about Lindbergh's speech, and I've heard little snippets. Like I've seen, people wrote it down and posted it in an article, but I've never actually heard the speech itself. But it wouldn't. I wonder if maybe that's why they took his kid.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of controversy. His father was very much against the Federal Reserve and was explaining to people how crooked and corrupt this whole situation was. So Charles Lindbergh was another JFK-like kid, growing up in a political environment who really had no interest in politics during his early years. But as he got older, he started talking about what was really going on, just like his father. And it's just another one of those, for your information, FYI type things. But there's a whole lot of things listed for events that have happened on 9/11 down throughout history. And what we're talking about here at Popeye is this is an ongoing stuff when we say conspiracies. We're talking about et tu, Brutus. I mean, this is a part of human nature. It goes back thousands of years. It's part of virtually every society. It's not a fluke. It's history. And so people who don't understand these kinds of things and think that everything is some sort of a conspiracy theory don't understand the first thing about history. I always ask them, well, you don't believe in conspiracy theories. Do you believe in history? Do you know what history is?
Well, any history professor will tell you, Steve, that if you actually sit down and he's honest with you in a conversation, because I've talked to multiple professors about this whenever I've bumped into them, wherever it may be, and I engage people in conversation. And if they tell me that they're a professor, and if I find out they're a history professor, it's even better. And I ask them, is it true? And the answer is always yes, but I say to them, is it true that even mainstream historians know that there's two views of history, a conspiratorial view and a coincidence view? And he said yes. It's one of two theories you have to subscribe to of how things work. Either you believe in the coincidence theory of it, where everything happens that even though it looks
happened.
It just happens
anyways.
Even though it looks like it's related, it's not. It's just a coincidence. Or you have the conspiracy view of history, and that That is that everything is interconnected and has happened for a reason, as facts and evidence show.
Here's a couple of coincidences. September 11th, 1943, World War II, German troops occupy Kosovo and I can't read that, Corsica and Kosovo. 1943, World War II, start of the liquidation of the ghettos in Minsk and Lida by the Nazis. 1944, September 11th, 1944, the first Allied troops of the U.S. cross into Western Germany. 1944, World War II, RAF bombing raid on, I can't read this, my eyes are completely shut. I haven't slept all night.
That's okay, dude. I know what you mean. If you look back at September 11th, it's another one of these dates where over and over and over again things happen, and you can't just say, well, it's a coincidence. It's because they initiate a lot of these things on purpose on these days as a ritual, as some sort of ritual sacrifice. Sometimes, I don't think that all those deaths, and Christopher Everard's talked about this. Don't think that all those deaths about that, all those people instantaneously dying. Remember, a lot of people, when they die, if something happens that fast and they die, sometimes anybody that understands the paranormal world, they'll tell you that the soul sometimes hangs around or gets displaced because it was so rapid and so fast. Can you imagine the amount of energy, spiritual soul energy, that was released when those buildings came down and all those people?
Boom, instantly.
Because not just, remember, we lost 343 firefighters, but there were civilians inside those buildings up at the top floors that just disintegrated.
Yeah.
Can you imagine all the energy that was released?
Particulate bone matter.
But think about this on an esoteric level. Listen, think about this on an esoteric level. This is really important. Think about how these, we all understand that these guys are satanic at the core. They worship, whether it's whether like Ike is correct and they're reptilians from another dimension or not, whatever, demons, whatever the hell you want to call them. There's some sort of evil force that they are worshiping, and they are feeding this energy to that and into themselves. This sacrifice, this blood sacrifice stuff. And if you look at it, I can't think of a better way, if you were one of these Luciferian psycho evil pricks, to kill as many people as you possibly could for your sacrifice. Just think about the amount of soul energy that was released. And this isn't hippy dippy wacko talk. We all have a soul. Think about the amount of energy that was released because of that. You got to wonder, were there sick pricks sitting somewhere in robes trying to absorb it? You never know.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting stuff. It really is. We've talked about the 7-7, the numbers here, of course, and there's always some sort of a drill going on at the same time that mirrors the actual event. And this is also a coincidence, too. Remember, FDR said, though, which school of history he belonged to, Popeye, because he said if something happens and it has a political ramification or an aspect to change, you can be sure that it wasn't coincidence. Somebody made it happen. Outside of just freak weather events.
He said nothing, I think it was nothing in politics happens by chance or something like that.
Right. So which school would he belong to?
Yeah, obviously they would look at him, I guess you could call him a conspiracy theorist, because he's outright telling you that people get together and conspire to do bad things. I guess that means he's a tinfoil hat wearer. I guess it means he's crazy, Steve.
A four-term.
Yeah, four-term tinfoil hat wearer conspiracy theorist, huh? But we're crazy because we just look at regular history and you can point it out like, wow. But we're crazy because we point it out rather than look at Dancing with the Stars. See, that's how they get people to think you're crazy, through Pavlovian programming. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the final segment of the September 11th, 2011, 10th anniversary edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Popeye, from FederalJack.com. I'm hanging out with Chris Gio and Sheree of Truth Frequency, Steve Stars, and my buddy JJink. And we've been, I guess you could say, we've been kind of all over the map the second hour because we've talked about 9/11 so much. We wanted to kind of give out some other information and show you how things are connected. It's all in this huge web. vast conspiracy, as it were. And Sheree did an article, and she gave it to me during the break, and you guys should check it out. I'll drop the link in the chat room. But for the listeners, just go to truthfrequencynews.com, and just the article's possible false flag alert 9/11 anniversary with bombs planted in New York City or D.C. infrastructure during Irene with a question mark. And she brings up a good point. You know, they evacuated areas that had never been evacuated before. They closed down the New York City subway system, which has never happened before. That means there was nobody in or around those tracks.
10 feet of water right now.
Well, no, I know it floods, but that's not the point. They scared the crap out of everybody so that they could get into those subway tunnels. What the hell were they doing in the subway tunnels? This is the first time in history that they had those tunnels shut down. They could have gotten in there and planted something, and then weeks, months, even years later, let it off and then blame it on, you know, the flavor of the day, whoever it happens to be. And Sheree's article really breaks down a lot of this. You know, she talks about Bloomberg. She talks about how they used Hurricane Irene to scare the crap out of everybody and close everything down. She's got pictures of the subways being closed. I'm telling you, this has never happened before. And Irene was way smaller than other hurricanes that have hit the area. I grew up there. So something is up. And I don't trust Bloomberg. I trust him about as far as I could throw him. You know.
And then as soon as we get close to the 9/11 anniversary, Bloomberg and Police Commissioner Kelly announced their intention to increase New York's already increased security level by adding additional security to bridges, tunnels, landmarks, places of worship, government buildings, plus more bag inspections and bomb sniffing dogs on the subway.
Yeah, everybody that I've talked to, I have two of my friends that are up there, and I spoke to them off air yesterday, and they were telling me that it's just they were going to fly up there, and they decided not to because of the whole police state grid. They figured they would drive up there, and they said even driving up in a rental car, they said when they got, and these are guys that, you know, they've been in and out of New York hundreds of times, and they're like, dude, it's completely different. It's like a prison, like a little prison colony.
And what's also interesting is now they're saying in the media that it was a wild goose chase. There's no Arabs or anything like that. But you still
and they admitted that yesterday too. That's the key thing. They were talking about that yesterday, and yet you still hear them. Be afraid. Look over your shoulder, Sheree. Al Qaeda might come and bite you. Woo.
Yeah, and if they're not Arab Al Qaeda,
but if you jaywalk and run your mouth, you will get clubbed in the head by an NYPD.
Because you're white Al Qaeda, JJ. I mean, only white Al Qaeda would jaywalk and say something bad to a police officer.
Sorry.
Well, and with Joe Biden scares me because he's so quiet.
He's a Zionist.
Yes.
And he's an admitted Zionist, by the way. He's even said it. There's video of him saying, I am a Zionist. Go on, Sheree.
He said the thing we're all most worried about is what they call a lone ranger, a lone actor, not some extremely complicated plan like it took to take down the World Trade Towers. After he said that, they started coming up with these stories about U-Haul trucks, Penske trucks, and that just rings Oklahoma City for me.
Yeah,
you know, so it makes
they always run off the same playbook. It's not like they're ever original about what they do.
They'll have little drills going all over the country with little Mad Hatters, little Joe Stacks here and there.
Apparently there is.
Everything seemed quiet.
Apparently there was a counterterrorism drill already planned for rail agencies in advance. Police planned a show of force at Grand Central Terminal, Pennsylvania Station, and the Times Square subway station on Friday because of a previously planned counter-terror drill with rail agencies.
And you know what? They did the same thing. It's funny because they did the same thing down here in Florida, West Palm Beach, which is the county. It's 2 counties above where I am. They have, we have the train runs from here all the way up the East Coast, and they just happened. Now, of course, this is them. It was a pre-planned drill. It just happens to coincide with the threat. This new terror threat and the anniversary of 9/11. But it's a drill that was already pre-planned. Well, of course, then it just doesn't happen to coincide. You planned it, you dick. You just said we planned the drill. So therefore, you planned the drill right before September 11th. Don't tell me it's just a coincidence but you planned it. You could have picked any other time. So don't say it's a freaking coincidence. It's doublespeak. It's complete doublespeak. It's ridiculous. And they're like, oh, well, it's just a random one. And there's other similar, this is all they said, there are similar drills going on around the country. And then, but it has nothing to do with the terror threat. And then, like you said, they came out yesterday, well, we think the terror threat is horse crap because, there's nearly no credible evidence. Of course, where did it come from? The CIA. So some dick in his office was smoking a cigar with his feet up, drinking brandy, and he's like, okay, this is what we do. A terror threat. And, we'll scare them. Not minding that Tom Ridge came out a couple of years ago and admitted that they used to come out with they used to up the threat level condition. Remember the color code crap? He admitted that they used to up that and do it and change it for political reasons. So here you go, former head of Homeland Security admitting that they used to come out and say, ooh, oogity boogity, oogity boogity, be scared, be afraid, rah, for political reasons.
They got to be laughing at these little, 3 police, little towns with 3 cops in them getting tanks and battle gear. They got to be laughing their ass off.
Well, they call them their dogs, JJ.
I would interject something there, Popeye. I don't think that's exactly how it happened. I think what happened is they went to a Bilderberg meeting. They were smoking DMT, and the clockwork elves killed them.
High five.
Yes, high five, Chris. I'll give you a virtual high five. That was awesome. Well, I mean, think about it.
What would Jesse Ventura say right now?
Yeah, hey, you know what? Hold on, let me see. I'm getting a special phone call from Jesse right now. Oh my God, it's Governor Ventura. Governor Ventura, how are you?
There might be some truth to that, I was talking with Barbara Walters, and she was telling me the same thing.
Does Barbara Walters think that 9/11 was an inside job, Governor?
No, I think Barbara Walters smokes DMT and talks to the machine elves. The Clockwork Elves.
Clockwork Elves.
Barbara Walters talks to the Clockworks Elves, too. She must be a Bilderberger.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, what is Jesse Ventura going to do in this next election era? I mean, I think
to know if he's going to stand at now, and I'm not trying to cause some controversy, but I want to know if he's going to talk about any of the other alternative theories about 9/11 in his new show and some of the other stuff, because he's been exposed, and I'm not saying Judy Wood is accurate, but he's been exposed to that kind of stuff, so he even knows the fringe end of it. You know what I mean? If that's what you want to call it, or he knows the entire gambit. Because I don't want to say that she's fringe. That's like an ad hominem attack. So we'll say he understands the entire thing. Jesse's throwing himself into it. He does what you should accurately do. Actually, expose yourself to
everything,
all the theories, and then allow the evidence to point you in the direction that it actually, you follow the evidence. You don't try to make the evidence take you where you want to go. You let the evidence show you where it goes.
Well, if you look at all the evidence, there is one conclusion that you have to come to, and that's that
crap.
Gravity-driven collapse could not have happened. I mean, facts are facts, guys.
JJ, stop quoting physics. Okay, science doesn't count. This is 9/11, and on 9/11,
my last thoughts today will be path of most resistance.
Physics doesn't count on 9/11. Just remember that.
Thanks
Truth
for
doesn't
having me on.
count. I was going to ask one question, and kind of, I know because we're wrapping up time, but Popeye, you were there. I haven't heard your whole story, but I'm still concerned about the first responders. I know they've been treated just like dirt after they've been
heralded and thrown away, just like veterans.
Heralded as heroes, and now basically ignored. And
not allowed to go to Ground Zero for the 10th anniversary.
They were banned. What actually happened?
Well, they're trying to make everyone think that the first responders are them few hundred firemen, not thousands and thousands of other people.
They don't want people to realize there's like 90,000 first responders, but I don't know if anybody. I have to see if any, how it went down. And I didn't hear anything. I've been on the radio for almost 6 hours, so I don't know if any of them showed up at the ceremony or anything today. I'll have to check it out, but. They just said that there wasn't room, because Bush was going to be there and Obama was going to be there, security concerns. I think they didn't want a bunch of dying people showing up in wheelchairs and all their hair falling out to be on television, if you want to.
Yeah, because it would embarrass them, because they said the air was safe to breathe. They said everything was going to be fine. And they ignored them for so long that most of them were dead.
I played the clips on JJ's show, and I did a show about it last week where I played the clips from this movie called Dust to Dust, The Health Effects of 9/11. Yeah. And I played this 3-minute clip where the EPA in their own reports admit that their original reports and their original assessment of the quality of air at Ground Zero was not based on science at all. 1 100%, not even a 0.5%. It was 100% based on politics from the White House. And you wonder,
criminal act.
And you wonder why they wouldn't want these sick and dying people down at Ground Zero. At least I know why they wouldn't want them down there. Guys, as always, even 2 hours is never enough with you guys. Thank you for coming on. Guys, go check out Truth Frequency. If not, go check out Joe Joseph's show. But as always, on Sundays, Christopher Everard does a Sunday broadcast, so go check that out. Chris and Sheree helped him with that. Guys, thanks for coming on. JJ, thanks for hanging out. Steve, thanks for hanging out. And I'll see you Wednesday. Later, guys.
Thanks a lot, guys. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Stand by, Popeye.
That relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. Dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program, for from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. For I have complete confidence in the response and dedication of our citizens whenever they are fully informed. I not only could not stifle controversy among your readers, I welcome it. This administration intends to be candid about its errors. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We intend to accept full responsibility for our errors, and we expect you to point them out when we miss them. Without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. And that is why our press was protected by the First Amendment, the only business in America specifically protected by the Constitution, not primarily to amuse and entertain, not to emphasize the trivial and the sentimental, not to simply give the public what it wants, but to inform, to arouse, to reflect, to state our dangers and our opportunities, to indicate our crises and our choices, to lead, mold, educate, and sometimes even anger public opinion. This means greater coverage and analysis of international news, for it is no longer far away and foreign, but close at hand and local. It means greater attention to improved understanding of the news, as well as improved transmission. And it means, finally, that government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
And that is why I do what I do. That is why I spend all this volunteer time. That's why my fellow radio show hosts and my friends spend all their time doing what they do in research. None of us make money doing this. We're doing what we have to do because the mainstream media failed in what they were asked to do by President Kennedy 50 years ago. They are not informing and alerting the general public. They are not telling them that there's a massive conspiracy. They are not telling them what is going on. They're not warning them about the health issues with vaccines. They're not telling you about mind control programs. So it's left up to people like Chris Geo and Sheree from Truth Frequency, or JJink, or Steve Stars, or Bob Tuskin, or Alex Thomas and Shepard Ambellis of the Intel Hub, or myself and the other guys over at federaljack.com. It's left up to people like us, and others as well. Jones, Gary Franchi, like, everybody plays a part. You know, we're doing what needs to be done. Some make money off of it, but most of us, aside from maybe one of the last people mentioned, don't make any money doing this. We spend a lot of money, but we don't make it. But we're standing up and doing what's right. We're going to break.
Either we heal as a team, or we're going to crumble. Inch by inch, play by play, till we're finished. We're in hell right now, gentlemen, believe me. And we can stay here, get the shit kicked out of us, or we can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell, 1 inch at a time. You know, when you get old in life, things get taken from you. I mean, that's part of life. But you only learn that when you start losing stuff. You find out life's this game of inches. So is football. Because in either game, life or football, the margin for error is so small. I mean, 1/2 a step too late or too early, and you don't quite make it. 1/2 second too slow, too fast, you don't quite catch it. The inches we need are everywhere around us. They're in every break of the game, every minute, every second. On this team, we fight for that inch. On this team, we tear ourselves and everyone else around us to pieces for that inch. We claw our fingernails for that inch. Because we know when we add up all those inches, that's going to make the fucking difference between winning and losing. Between living and dying. I'll tell you this, in any fight, it's the guy who's willing to die who's going to win that inch. And I know if I'm going to have any life anymore, it's because I'm still willing to fight and die for that inch. Because that's what living is. There's 6 inches in front of your face. Now, I can't make you do it. You got to look at the guy next to you. Look into his eyes. Now, I think you're going to see a guy who will go that inch with you. You're going to see a guy who will sacrifice himself for this team because he knows when it comes down to it, you're going to do the same for him. That's the team, gentlemen. And either we heal now as a team, or we will die as individuals.
Ideas are bulletproof.
Welcome to the show, guys. It is September 11th, 2011, the 10th anniversary of the 9/11 false flag mind control operation terror attack. This is Popeye, and today I'm joined by an awesome roundtable of guests. But before I bring them on, I'm going to play something. It's a clip I've played before, but today it's very appropriate for me to play it again and let the people, the listeners, hear it. It's a message from JFK that's almost 50 years old, and I don't care if anybody thinks it gets old to listen to it. We need to listen to it again and listen to what he was talking about, because it is very pertinent to what is going on today in the world all over the place.
President John F. Kennedy.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy.
We'll be back in a minute. Stay tuned. When we come back, we'll introduce all my guests. You don't want to miss it.
Lie to pretend to be free till you die a slave, a soldier in the desert searching for a ghost in the cave for the corporation. I run out of patience, sick of seeing troops sent to die for your lives, spending dollars in debt. We holler in protest till we have your arrest. We will not rest, and we know what you did that day. Kill your own citizens to advance your ways. All my real patriots stand up and say 9/11.
9/11 was totally an inside job. I know Bob Tuskin hates that term, but I particularly don't just blame the government. I said before, the government's a tool. But anyway, I can get into that in a minute. I want to introduce my panel of guests that are hanging out with me today for the 10th anniversary of 9/11. They are all friends of mine, very well-respected researchers and radio show hosts. So let me say hello to Steve Stars. Steve, say hello.
Glad to be with you. Thanks, Popeye.
Chris, Gio, and Sheree of Truth Frequency.
Hey, how you doing?
Always a pleasure.
JJ.
Hey. Hello. Hey, thanks for having me on, man. Thanks, really.
No problem, JJ. So, guys, I have to ask you. Everybody remembers where they were 10 years ago. I know I remember I was 10 years ago. First and foremost, what are your thoughts about the past 10 years? And I'll start with Chris and Sheree.
You want to start? Oh, you want me to start?
Yeah.
The last 10 years have been very strange. It's like society changed in a fundamental way after 9/11. And I remember where I was at 9/11, but I think, everybody every year always goes over where they were on 9/11. And I think it just kind of feeds into the traumatization of it. Whenever every year we go through this, is there going to be another terror attack? And then another terror attack doesn't happen. And then we're like, good thing we've got all this security now. It kept us from having another terror attack. And it's like down is up and right is left. It doesn't make any sense. Society nowadays makes no sense whatsoever. And as a result, a lot of people are going crazy because of that.
You remember how it was before? You remember how different it was?
Oh, my God. We left the front door